God created a good world. But since Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, things have been spiraling downward for humanity. Cain became jealous of his brother Abel, and even though God warned him, Cain listened to other voices and murdered his brother. Humanity continues to encounter God, but things aren't as they were intended to be. They are not learning from God. They are not listening to God. Humanity continues to forget that they were created in God's image, that they were invited to live with God. And so this spiral continues downward at an alarming rate. God saw that human evil was out of control. People were choosing evil left and right, and it broke God's heart. The earth had become corrupt, and there was violence everywhere you looked. The voices of shame and voices that pretended to be wise were the ones being followed, not the voice of God. So God decided to wipe God's creations from the face of the earth. But as God looked around, God saw Noah. Noah was different. Noah was not perfect, but he was good. Noah was a man of integrity among the people of his time. Noah walked with God and listened to God. So God came to Noah and God said, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of their choices. I'm going to destroy both humanity and earth. A flood is coming that will destroy everything. But I have a plan for you, Noah, and you're going to need a really big boat. Build it from cypress wood, make rooms in it, coat it with pitch inside and out. This is a big boat, Noah. Make it 450 feet long and 75 feet wide and 45 feet high. Build a roof for it and put a window near the very top. There will be a door on the side of the boat, and give it 3 decks, lower, middle, and upper. I'm going to establish a covenant with you, Noah. You'll board the boat and bring your wife and your sons' wives with you. Get all the food and supplies that you need and store it up for you and the animals. Oh, did I forget to mention the animals? You are also to take 2 of every living creature, a male and a female, on board the boat to preserve their lives with you. 2 of every species of bird, mammal, and reptile. Or maybe it was 7 pairs of clean animals and 1 pair of unclean animals. The storytellers don't seem to have the details straight. But either way, God intended to preserve the creation that God had made. Noah did everything that God commanded him to do. He built the ark exactly as planned, even when the voices of the world ridiculed him and made fun of him. After all, who needs a boat that big? The world is fine and it's a beautiful day. What crazy voice is Noah listening to now? And then Noah begins gathering up the animals, and I'm sure that caused a scene in his neighborhood. What is Noah doing now? First a boat and now a zoo? But no matter what his neighbors said, Noah was faithful to the task that he had been given. Noah listened to God's wisdom over all the other voices. And so Noah did everything that God commanded him. God said to Noah, because you were righteous, board the boat, you and all your family and the animals, because in 7 days I will pour rain on earth for 40 days and 40 nights. I'll make a clean sweep of everything that I've made. So Noah did. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters covered the earth. Noah and his wife and sons and their wives boarded the boat, and with them every kind of wild and domestic animal, right down to all the kinds of creatures that crawl, and all kinds of birds, and anything that flies. They came to Noah and to the ship in pairs, everything and anything that had the breath of life in it. Male and female of every creature came just as God had commanded Noah. And then God shut the door behind them. And on that seventh day, just as God had said, the floodwaters came. It was a dark and stormy night, and then another, and then another. For 40 days and 40 nights, God sent more and more water, pouring out of a tank from above and a tank from below until all the earth was covered, even the tops of the tallest mountains. The waters kept rising, the flood deepened on the earth, the boat floating on the surface. The world looked empty, like before creation. There was only deep, dark waters as far as the eye could see. Not that many eyes could see it. Every living, breathing creature that was not on the boat had died. God wiped out the whole of creation, people and animals, crawling creatures and flying birds, all gone now. Only Noah and his company on the boat lived. The floodwaters took over for 150 days. The world was empty now except for this lone boat on the surface of the waters. And eventually the waters began to subside, and the boat no longer floated along, but came to rest on top of a mountain. They all stayed inside the boat for 40 more days as it rested there. And at the end of 40 days, Noah opened a window and released a raven. No one knows what happened to the raven, but it did not return. So Noah sent out a dove to test out if the water had subsided enough. The dove returned as it found neither food nor home, so Noah knew that it was not time yet. 7 days later, he tried again. When the dove returned with an olive leaf, Noah knew that the waters had subsided enough, at least to the treetops. And so 7 days later, he released a dove a third time. And when it did not return, Noah knew that it had found dry ground. So out they came from the boat, Noah and his family and all the animals, the livestock, the wild animals, those that crawled, those that flew. And Noah took some of the animals whom he had saved from the flood and sacrificed them to God. God once again told creation to multiply and to fill this new world. And then God made a covenant with Noah and all the living creatures that such a flood would never again destroy the entire earth. As a sign of this, God made a bow, which he hung in the sky, as a reminder of the promise that God made to Noah and his descendants. God said, "Whenever I bring clouds over the earth, a bow will appear in the clouds, and I will remember my covenant between me and you and all of the living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters destroy it all. Never again will all of life be gone. When this bow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between myself and all of the living creatures of every kind on the earth." And so the world began a second time. When Noah chose to listen to the voice of God instead of the voice of his neighbors, it set him apart. He was probably given a really hard time. I imagine he may have become the weird neighbor that you talk about over coffee because there was literally a 450-foot boat in his backyard. I'm sure that he felt isolated, but Noah trusted God. Noah trusted God that a flood was coming, even as Joe down the road reminded Noah that nothing like this had ever happened before. Noah trusted God that he and his family would be safe, even when Jill said that no boat that big could ever float and hold so many living creatures at once. Noah trusted that God's wisdom was greater than the knowledge of his neighbors. But what I really want to look at in the story is not what happens to Noah when he encounters God. It's what we know about God because of God's encounter with Noah. I find it fascinating that many people groups and religions from the ancient Near East have a flood narrative. I don't think this means that the story we have of Noah is a lie. I think we can logically conclude that there was a massive and devastating flood a long time ago in this very region that Noah lived in, and everyone was affected. I find it fascinating because I think it points to the fact that regardless of our religion, humanity is always trying to answer the same questions. Since the beginning of time, people have been trying to make sense of natural disasters and human suffering. This is especially true for people of faith who attempt to reconcile their understanding of God with their life experiences. Every one of us has asked some version of the question, where is God in this? When we're faced with difficult circumstances. We are all doing our best to make sense of what has happened, and the Israelites are asking the same question in the story of the flood that you and I ask even today. Where is God? Where is God in the midst of this devastation? And so the Israelites would tell this story about a massive flood in their region and do their best to figure out how God was involved. They were doing their best to make sense of what happened and to understand where God was in the midst of it. They got some things right and they got some things wrong because, like all of us, they were limited in their understanding. But when the Israelites asked where God was in difficult times, this story was their answer. When God encounters a world that is full of violence and injustice, a world that does not listen to God's voice or seek to be in relationship with God, God sees Noah, a man who listened to God, who was blameless as he learned how to live from God. And so God goes directly to Noah and talks to him. God tells Noah this plan to destroy the world, but that Noah and his family will be saved. God isn't annoyed. God isn't ashamed. God sends a flood. But here's the important thing that makes our flood story different from all the other stories of those days. God shows up. God purposefully saves a human family and a family from every other creature on earth. God does not sit back and just watch the devastation happen. No, our God shows up and helps people in the midst of the flood. And you might ask, but Cynthia, didn't God cause the flood in the first place? How is God showing up in that? And the honest answer is, I don't know. Genesis gives us a couple reasons why God chose to use such a violent devastation as a flood, and both of them are confusing and hard to parse out. The storytellers of Genesis don't have a clear reason for it either, although there is certainty that it was indeed God who sent the flood, that God was the only one who could control the waters in this way. But I would point us to the very end of the story when God makes a covenant with all the living creatures of the earth. God says that God will never again devastate the earth with a flood that destroys all life. And God hangs a bow in the sky to remind God's self of that covenant. We call it a rainbow, but in Hebrew, the word translates a bow, like a bow and arrow. God has hung up a weapon of war. never to be used again as a reminder of this covenant every single time it rains and storms, even today. It is a sign of peace. It's a sign of reconciliation. God has hung up God's weapon, has given it up, and even pointed the weapon away from humanity, because God will never use that violence towards humanity again. This is the answer to that question of where is God that we ask over and over in times of suffering. The answer is that God is with us. God is still showing up even today. God shows up and is with people who are suffering everywhere. God shows